Alright, this video is going to be instructions on the connect a router to a LAN lab for Chapter 6 in the CCNA 1 course. So I have the packet tracer exercise open right here in front of us. I've got the instructions in front of me, so let's go ahead and go through it. You've got an addressing table at the top of your instructions, and our goal is to display router information, configure router interfaces, and verify that configuration once it's been made. So let's go ahead. I'm going to hop down to part 1 where we want to display our interface information. So part 1A, our instruction is to, it asks us which command displays statistics for all interfaces configured on the router. So we're on router, let's see which one they want us to use. They want us to use R1, so I'm going to click there and get into that. I guess I don't need to make that too much bigger. Go into command line. It's already got a password, you say. Interesting. I'm going to assume that it's Cisco. It is. What do you know? And enable password is probably class. And I'm going to go into, well, if I'm doing show commands, then this is as far as I need to go, privilege exec mode. So to show all interfaces, I'm going to type in show interfaces, press enter. Okay, and it's going to show you a lot more information if you click type show interfaces versus show interface brief. You've got how many runts, giants are received, your duplex mode, so on and so forth. I'm going to keep on moving on down the list. In fact, I'm going to hit the space bar to page down a bit at a time until, alright, so you can see that show interfaces gives you a whole lot of information. I've got the information for VLAN 1 here. If I scroll up, I'll find my interface information for fast Ethernet 013. If I go a little further up, I've got 012, there 011. So you've got a lot of information that's displayed here. It tells you if the line is up or down, but it also shows you some information that isn't going to be as important to us as we are just learning about this stuff. So we'll typically do a show IP interface brief rather than just show interfaces. If we just want to show one interface, we can type in show, and this is the second part. Second question on the lab. Show interface, not faces, and then the interface you want to show. I'm going to type in S. I think all I have to do is S for serial. That should be enough. 0, 0, 0, and that is enough. So I typed in show interfaces S000 here. I got serial. I know it looks like it might be a 10, but that's the L in serial there. Is up. Line protocol is up, connected, and a whole bunch of other information you've got down there. So if you want to show one interface only, then, well, that's one way to do it. Actually, that is the way to do it. So we have some questions based on this output to answer on your worksheet. So what is the IP address of R1? For that port it is 209.165.200.225, and it's a /30 address. We haven't talked about that, or did we? I think that comes up in the next chapter. We'll talk about the CIDR notation. We haven't talked about that just yet. You got what bandwidth is it? You got BW for bandwidth. That's 1,544 kilobits per second. So you got that. What else? Enter the command to, well, that's all for serial 000 that they want us to look up here. All right. I'm actually, because I don't need to see any more information down here where it says more, if I just press an arrow key, that'll get me out and I can start from privileged exec mode again. So the second part says enter the command to display statistics for gigabit Ethernet 00. So I'm going to go ahead, show interface. Instead of S000, okay, down here, and I just pressed up to repeat the command that I just typed in. I'm going to type in you know, I'll spell it out so I'm not shorthanding. I'll go GI tab, so it says gigabit Ethernet. That's what you would type out if you wanted to type out the whole thing. You can abbreviate it to just GI, but that works as well. 00 is what we're looking for. Okay. And what questions do we have here? What is the IP address for that gigabit Ethernet port on R1? Well, do we see one? No. The line is down, so it's down with no IP address. So it's going to be our job, I think, to bring it up and give it an IP address in just a second. So that is down. What is the MAC address of that gigabit Ethernet interface? We should be able to find that. Alright, so hardware is CN gigabit Ethernet, address is 000D, BD 6C, 7D01. That is your MAC address. Remember, your MAC address does not have to be separated by colons at each 2 hex digits. It can be separated by a period at every 4. So that's the way it's written here. They've written it in the way you're maybe not used to seeing it. What's the bandwidth? Come down here, our bandwidth is, what is that, 100,000 or 1 million kilobits a second. So that's what you have for your bandwidth. All right, so there's that. That'll answer those questions for the first section, step 1 on your lab. Okay, we're going on to step 2, and we're going to use a show IP interface brief, which is a little bit friendlier of a readout to see on your screen because there's not as much information. Sometimes you'll need the information in the show interface command, but show IP interface brief looks a little something like, not like that because you have to spell correctly, like that. Okay. And that's it. There's no more information to show beneath that. You can see what's up, what's down, what the IP addresses are for each port. So that typically will be enough information for us as we move through our labs, as we go through class. So let's see what they have us answering here. How many serial interfaces are on R1? And oops, I went down too far. Or did I? No. Let's see. How many serial interfaces are there on R1 and R2? So in order to answer that question, you're going to have to do the same command on R2, and you're going to basically compare the two. Okay, so in R1, I've got 2 serial interfaces because that's the router I'm in, R1. You've got serial interface 000, serial 001. Those are my 2 serial interfaces. That answers step B1 there on your handout. The next question is how many fast Ethernet interfaces are there? Or no, I'm sorry, not even fast Ethernet, just Ethernet. So how many Ethernet interfaces are there on R1 and R2? So you got 2 gigabit Ethernet here on R1. You got 4 more fast Ethernet, so you've got 6 on R1. If you go and do the show IP interface brief command on R2, you'll be able to see how many interfaces are over there. So I'm going to let you do that on your own. I'm not going to go collect that information for you. Are all the interfaces on R1 the same? If no, explain the difference. Okay, well, you can look at them and probably just tell by name that they're not the same. So your fast Ethernet ports are going to be rated at 100 megabits per second. Your gigabit Ethernet ports are going to be rated at gigabit speeds, a gigabit per second. So that's going to be the difference between your fast Ethernet and your gigabit Ethernet. Okay, so they're not the same. They have different speeds. So that will take you through step 2. We're going down to step 3, where we're supposed to show the routing table on R1. So we talked about this, or we will talk about this in the lecture. To show your routing table, you've got to show IP route command that you can issue, and that's going to show your routing table. Okay. So that's what we have there so far. How many connected routes are there? Well, there's one. I know it says CNL, but that CNL has to do with one connected route. You can see it's connected to serial 000. On the C, you've got the network that is connected, and on the L, you've got the interface that it's connected to, the address of the interface that it's connected through or connected to. So name the network up here, interface that's connected to that network down here on the L is what you get. So when the lab asks you which route is listed, it's the one with the C next to it. And remember, the C means it's a directly connected route. We'll talk about that in the lecture. D means basically dynamic or learned through EIGRP. And there are a few other ones we'll talk about as well. Two, really, at this point. There's a couple other, though, that are available. In fact, you've got the codes up here for the different items that you'll see as we work through routing tables. The next question, how does a router handle a packet destined for a network that is not listed in the routing table? Well, what's going to happen is, well, if the network's not listed in the routing table, packet's going to be dropped. That's the answer there. We don't have a 0000 entry, which would be where your router would send a packet if none of the other entries listed. So since we don't have that 000 entry, if we got something that's not destined for one of the routes in the routing table or networks in the routing table, that packet's going to be dropped. Alright, the next section we're in part 2, by the way, configure router interfaces. We're going to do just that, configure the router interface. So you'll see that the interface is on my router that's connected to a network up top for PC1, and the network down below for PC2 is, well, all the networks except for the link between the two routers are down. So we've got to bring up those interfaces. This is the serial interface here. You got your gigabit Ethernet interfaces there connected to your different networks that we shall configure. So let's go ahead and do it. So step 1, we're still on router 1, which is exactly where we are. We need to get into global config, because I'm going to config T, which is configure terminal. Get in there by pressing enter. Then I need to get into the interface that I'd like to configure. So I want to do the gigabit Ethernet 00 interface. So enter base. I'll go gigabit Ethernet. I'll spell it all out for you. I'm just using tab after I type in GI, by the way, to fill it in. Remember, you can always press tab if you want to have the program fill in the rest of the command for you, or at least that word. So I've got gigabit Ethernet 00, just kind of like when we were entering VLAN 1 on a switch. Interface VLAN 1 is what we type. We type interface, then the interface that we want. Now we're in config if. Okay, so we're configuring that interface. I need to give it an IP address for sure. And that's 192.168.10.1. Whoops, what did I forget? Subnet mask. So make sure you add the subnet mask in there too. Or don't put an extra S on address. And then, aha, there it goes. We gotta bring it up. It's shut down by default, so no shut down. We'll do it there. And interface is now up. We are also going to add a description to this interface. So we'll type in description LAN connection to S1. Alright, it's accepted. There it goes. So there we are. That takes us down to step 1C there. UR1 should now be able to ping PC1. Let's see, after I've done that, I'm going to take a look at the graphic, and you can see that this is now lit up green because I brought up that interface that's connected to this network. Okay, gave it an IP address on the network, which was 192.168.10.1. So there you go there. I need to try to ping PC1 over here, which has the IP address that you see on your exercise, which is, whoops, I need to get out of here, don't I? I'm going to go ahead and get out end, there we go. That's going to get me back to enable mode. So from there, I'm going to attempt my ping. So I'm going to ping, or you could have Control Z to get back here. Ping 192.168.1.10 and hope for the best. Expect the worst. I'm seeing the worst. Uh-oh. Did I type in something wrong? Let's find out. .10.10. My fault. So 0% success. It's not 1.10, it's 10.10. So 192.168.10.10, and hey, we were able to do it. 80% success rate. If I were to do it again, I believe I would get 100%. Yes, I do, because the first one just timed out. So sometimes that'll happen. That first ping will drop, but now we're good to go. So that's what you should see as you bring up that interface. So what we're supposed to do from there is the same process for the other interfaces on your router. I'm not going to do those on the video. So you'll configure the interface on R1 note down here, R2, R2 gigabit Ethernet interface 1 and 2. You're going to configure as well. Okay. Then you're going to back up that configuration. Once you've done it on both routers, you're going to copy running config to startup config. Yeah, and that should be the end of step 3. In part 2, that is. We still got a part 3 down here. Let me go ahead and take a look at what we got down there. So part 3, we're just verifying that you configured everything correctly. So you saw that I didn't go through and do all the instructions. I didn't configure the gigabit Ethernet 1 port on router 1. I didn't configure either port on router 2. So I'm not going to have complete information when I do my show. Which one do they want me to use? Show IP interface brief, I believe. Yep, show IP interface brief. So your readout should be more complete than mine. All right, so you've got some questions to answer. How many interfaces on R1 and R2 are in the up state? So up. I've got 1, 2. If I configured gigabit Ethernet 01, I would have 3. So that should be what you have. You should have 3. What part of the interface configuration is not displayed on this output? Well, I've got no subnet mask there. I can see my IP address. I don't have a subnet mask. So that's what they're looking for in the next question. What commands can you use to verify that? To see your subnet mask, you could use your show running config, or your show run. You could do your show interfaces. You saw when I typed in show interfaces, it gives us a lot of information. Part of that is your subnet mask. Show IP protocols also would show you your subnet mask. So there's all that. Then it says use the IP route command on both R1 and R2 to view the current routing table. So I'll do a show IP route. Again, yours will be more complete than mine. Alrighty, so let's see. How many routes do I have? I've got 4 routes on there. Okay. So one is a summary, one's a D, one's a C, one's a L. So it says how many connected routes use the C code. Alright, you are going to have 3 directly connected in the end. So one here, one there, one there. You should have 3 Cs. Hopefully. How many D do you have? Well, if you did everything correct, D is either dynamic or not directly connected. You're going to have, I believe, 2, because you'll have 2 that you learned from the router over here that aren't directly connected to your network. So you should have 2 Ds over there. Okay. If the router knows all routes in the network, then the number of connected routes dynamically learned should equal the total number of LANs and WANs. How many LANs and WANs are in the topology? Well, if you take that 3 plus the 2, you should get 5. That's how many LANs and WANs we have. Does the number of C and D routes shown, does this number match the number of C and D routes shown in the routing table? Yes, it should. It should. Okay, if it doesn't, then something went wrong. All right. And test end-to-end connectivity. So you're going to ping a couple times, and then you'll be done. And that'll be the end of the lab. So hopefully that is enough to get you through the lab. Now I'm going to go ahead and make sure I didn't skip over anything. Remember, these L's are just part of the C connection. They aren't separate entries. Okay. The C and the L go together as one entry in your routing table, one route. Okay, the C is the network you're connected to. The L is the link that is connected to that network from your router, or the interface that is connected to that. The IP address of the interface is connected to that network. Okay, so that's about it. Hopefully everything went well.